Hello and good evening, everybody, and I'd like to welcome everyone tonight to episode 69 of Album Rant. And I am very happy to be here tonight, and I'm really thankful that y'all are here with me if you're watching along. And as you can see right here from the title of the video and from what you see in front of you, I am going to do another episode about Whitesnake, and I have chosen to focus my efforts on their second studio released in 1979 entitled Lovehunter. Well, actually, let me back up. This is their second full-length album, but their third studio release, seeing how they did have an EP in 1978. Now, a few things I just want to kind of address before I get started. I get very, very excited when I'm talking about this because I am truly, truly passionate about this music. And yes, the voice does kind of get loud sometimes, and it's just how I am. It's just how I talk, and I have a very hard time controlling that. Now, if that is a turnoff from you, and many of you have expressed some concerns in the comments section, I have a very, very easy solution for you. Turn down the volume. It isn't hard, okay? We get it? Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and kind of do a little bit of history on the band before we kind of dive into the subject of the review. And as you guys probably know, by this point, I've talked about this many times, Whitesnake was formed out of the remnants of the mighty and the thunderous Deep Purple. In 1974, they kind of replaced a couple of members. Ian Gillan and Roger Glover were out, and they were replaced by Glenn Hughes and David Coverdale. Now, with those two guys, actually with that lineup, as I should say, they released two albums in 1974 entitled Burn and Stormbringer, and I loved both of them. 1975, they came back with a different guitarist. Richie Blackmore was swapped out for Tommy Bolin, but Glenn Hughes and David Coverdale were still with them, and they released Come Taste the Band. Now, this was one of those very brief periods in the band's history where drug usage was really starting to become apparent. From what I've read, Deep Purple, they never really were big drug users, except in the 1974-1975 era, and it was mostly Glenn Hughes and Tommy Bolin who were the most notorious. But the tour for Come Taste the Band was a complete and total disaster, and the band just kind of broke up by itself and just dissolved away, and everyone went on separate paths and started forming new projects. By this point, Richie Blackmore had already formed Rainbow, which I have discussed many times on this channel, and David Coverdale went off to make a solo band. Well, actually, let me back up. He always wanted to start a new musical act, and he, from what I understand, initially wanted to call it Whitesnake. Well, the record company pressured him or forced him to change the name of the band from Whitesnake to the David Coverdale solo band, or just David Coverdale. And the reasoning behind that was he had kind of made a name for himself for his time with Deep Purple, and so naturally they wanted to capitalize off of that. Can't blame them there, but he released two solo albums between 1977 and 1978. One of them was ironically called Whitesnake, and the other one was called North Winds. And with him, during that brief little solo period, he had recruited a guitarist by the name of Moody, who would eventually go on to perform on many of the actual Whitesnake albums. But few things led to another, and yada, yada, yada. Make a long story short, the band was eventually changed, or the name of the band was eventually changed to Whitesnake. And he had recruited some more permanent members to join the act, which included, like I said, Moody on guitar, Bernie Marsden on guitar, who had also previously played with UFO, apparently. from what I understand. Neil Murray on the bass, and someone by the name of Dave Dowle, I want to say. I keep mispronouncing that. I think it's Dave Dowle. I'll go with that, on the drums. And they released their very first EP in the year 1978, and it was called Snakebite. And some of the highlights from Snakebite were, of course, Come On. What else? Steal Away. I love Steal Away. And then a cover of Ain't No Love in the Heart of the City. Now, the thing about Whitesnake, this was a very, very different beast than Deep Purple. David Coverdale apparently really wanted to separate himself from the very hard rock influences of Deep Purple, and he wanted to focus more on the blues and soul and funk music, which I can definitely respect. I certainly think Burn and Stormbringer were better albums than maybe the Snakebite EP, but I do respect him for wanting to go off and do his own thing and establish his own individuality. Well, anyways, that Snakebite EP was later combined with a couple of tracks from the North Winds album, which was his solo album, or one of his solo albums. And it was eventually released as an 8-track compilation or combination of both Snakebite and a couple of songs from the David Coverdale solo career. But then in the year 1978, later in 1978, the band released their first full-fledged album entitled Trouble. And I really, really enjoyed it. Some of the highlights from that album were Take Me With You, Love to Keep You Warm, Lie Down, a modern-day love story. I think that's what it is. We also had a cover of Day Tripper. We had The Time Is Right for Love. We had Belgian Tom's Hat Trick. I think I said that correctly. And, of course, the title track. And I thought it was a very, very solid first album. But let's just kind of take a step back and kind of think things over for a second. David Coverdale was very busy in the year 1978. In March, he released the North Winds album. In June, he released the Snakebite EP. And then in October, he released the Trouble album. That's really kind of impressive. And something about the Trouble album, he was actually joined by former Deep Purple keyboardist Jon Lord. So essentially, we have 2 of the 5 former members of Deep Purple who are now in Whitesnake, and it's always nice to have a familiar face and everything and a familiar sound, and I thought he really added something to the band. So anyways, then later in 1979, they released their second studio album, and that is what you see right there in front of you, and it's entitled Lovehunter. So right there is the cover art, controversial as it is, and on the back we have the lineup. This is the same lineup as the Trouble album, and right there we have David Coverdale on lead vocals. We have Bernie Marsden on guitar and occasional lead vocals, and I will get to that later. We have Micky Moody on the guitar once again. We have Neil Murray on the bass. Dave Duck Dowle. I still think I'm saying that wrong. Oh well, if I am, please politely correct me in the comments section. And then, of course, we have Jon Lord over there on the keyboards. So let's go ahead and tackle side number 1. And it starts off with Long Way From Home. Now, guys, I know that a lot of people usually associate Whitesnake with kind of a hard rock sound with some glam influences thrown in there. And we're all familiar with songs like Here I Go Again, Still of the Night, Give Me All Your Love, Is This Love, Love Ain't No Stranger, Slide It In, Slow and Easy, and other songs that were very definite radio hits. Well, folks, as I said, this was released right when he came off of the Deep Purple tenure, and it was definitely a product of its time, and it is not the Whitesnake that you are probably the most well familiar with. No. So anyways, you're probably thinking that this album is going to start off with a very thunderous, a very heavy, a very fast, anthemic rocker to kind of set the stage. And you would be wrong, because Long Way From Home is actually a very slow song, and it's definitely got some soul influences in it as well, of course, along with some blues. I mean, he was very much into the blues, and this is very much a blues rock album. And I mean, it's a very interesting approach, and I actually do kind of like it, okay? He's definitely putting his heart and soul into this one, and I'm not fully sure what the lyrical content is dealing with, but I mean, I kind of feel the guy's pain, and man, he's putting so much raw emotion into it. But I mean, of course, the chorus goes, but it's a long, long way from home, and I'm trying to get a message to you. It's a long, long way from home. Now, that was probably pretty terrible, and I deeply apologize. But you probably noticed something right there. I said long, long way from home, and the title is Long Way From Home. Now, why that was changed, I do not know if this is the official reason, but just recently, Foreigner had come out with a very popular song called Long, Long Way From Home. And it's quite possible they wanted to individualize themselves from that song and kind of put a different spin on it. So it was just called Long Way From Home, even though that's not what he says in the song. Okay, now in the middle, in the interlude, we don't really have a very electric guitar solo, but we do have a keyboard solo, and I really, really like it. Jon Lord is one of the most talented he is one of the most talented keyboardists out there, at least from what I've heard, and I have really, really enjoyed his work. I think my top two keyboardists of all time are probably Jon Lord and Dennis DeYoung from Styx. Just my opinion. But again, like I said, this is a very slow song, but there's so much raw emotion in it, and I really do kind of like it. Okay, there is a music video out there for this one, and I think in the music video, Ian Pace is actually on drums, but he doesn't actually perform drums, just he appears in the music video because Ian Pace would join the band shortly after this album. So then after that, we come to the second track, which is the mighty, the anthemic, Walking in the Shadow of the Blues. And well, it lives up to its title because it's all about someone who really loves the blues, and they tell his story, and it's just what he is all about. Nice keyboard intro at the beginning. I mean, like I said, Jon Lord is just a beast here. He is definitely one of the stars here. But I mean, like I said, this is one of those songs that still survives in their set list today. They still do perform this one, and I think that is really, really incredible. But I mean, like I said, it's got a very bluesy rhythm, but it's also a lot more upbeat than Long Way From Home, and it's a little bit faster than Long Way From Home, and I really, really enjoy it. But because I gotta love the life I live. I'm gonna live the life I choose, and you gotta understand, I'm walking in the shadow of the blues. Absolute Whitesnake classic. So now we move on to track number 3. And it's quite possible this is not a lot of people's cup of tea, because again, they associate Whitesnake with some of their more 80s pop metal material. Help Me Through the Day is more reminiscent of Ain't No Love in the Heart of the City, which was a cover they did off the Snakebite EP. This thing is very, very slow, and it's soft, and it's bluesy, and there are some blues numbers out there that work really, really well. Led Zeppelin was absolutely incredible in this department. As far as soft and bluesy and emotional numbers, I think this one might fall a little bit flat, but I mean, it's still pretty solid. There is a pretty heavy, yet once again bluesy guitar solo in the middle, and I do kind of like it, so we have that at least. But then we come to Medicine Man. Dun 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 dun. Let's just listen to these lyrics. I'm the medicine man, your doctor of love, medicine man. Doctor of Love. Those lyrics are so incredibly cheesy, and it kind of sounds like they're ripping off Calling Dr. Love by Kiss, which came out a few years before this and was, of course, a very, very big hit. I don't know, I have never really liked Medicine Man too much, and I re-listened to this album right before this review, and well, my opinion of it didn't really change. I think it's a very silly song, and I don't think the rhythm is that great. I think the lyrics are corny, and if you like it out there, I totally respect that. There's definitely stuff I like that not a lot of other people like. Just for me, it doesn't really do it. But I think the side closes out very well with You and Me. This one is a very sexed up number, but it's got a very definite rock and roll feeling to it. Maybe more like something like you might hear from the 50s or 60s, and I think that's great. I think it's very creative. And again, listening to it once again right before this review, it's actually a lot heavier than I initially thought. I mean, you really got to crank the volume up because you really get the full effect of it when you turn the volume up. At least for me, a lot of these songs sound a lot better with the volume turned up. But again, I mean, it's a very sleazy number, but I don't know, the rhythm of it really does kind of do it for me, and I actually do recommend You and Me. But what's my favorite from side one? Well, it's obviously going to be Walking in the Shadow of the Blues. That is an absolute classic, and well, I just cannot get enough of that one. It just had to be that one. So let's move over here to side number 2. Now, we start with Mean Business. And this one has kind of a staccato going along with it, if that makes any sense. It's like da 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 da. And it reminds me a lot of Take Me With You off the Trouble album. That was the first song off the Trouble album, and it had a very similar rhythm, at least in my opinion. Now, this one is, it's also pretty sexed up once again. I mean, I've got my love gun loaded. Yeah, I know. Kiss had another song that came out 2 years ago called Love Gun. We get it. We know what the love gun is. It's the same thing as your Whitesnake. But I've got you in my sight. I never take no for an answer. Ooh. So you better say yes tonight. Okay. I told you the score right from the start. You'll never get to heaven if you break my heart. So if you don't mean business, knock on someone else's door, because it's a mean, mean business, staying alive if you fool with me. I mean, once again, it's got another very definite 50s rock and roll vibe behind it, and I think that's really great, and I really did enjoy it. The lyrics, again, they're a product of their time, and it just is what it is. You just got to roll with it, okay? May not be very socially acceptable by today's standards, but, geez, you know what? It's almost as if when he wrote this song, he had no idea what social standards would be like almost 50 years later. Oh, geez, who would have thought? But yeah, Mean Business, it's a pretty aggressive rocker, and something I forgot to mention, Neil Murray, his bass on this album really complements these songs very well. I think it gives them more of a punch to it, and I just really do appreciate that additional punch. So yeah, Mean Business. But then we come to the title track, Lovehunter. And this thing is just dripping with sleaze. Even the opening beat, it just sounds so incredibly sleazy. It's not a very fast song. This one's a little bit more slower and brooding, but man, it works well. But yeah, I mean, I need a woman to treat me good and give me everything a good woman should. Every day and every night, she'd be waiting on her brown-eyed boy to come and treat her right. I'm a love hunter, baby, sneaking up on you. This thing is an absolute beast, and I love the title track, absolutely. It did appear on one of their live albums that came out a few years after this, Live in the Heart of the City. And this was a very extended 10-minute jam session, and it just worked so well. It sounded incredible, and maybe I will review that live album one day. But as for the studio version, it just absolutely kicks. Rhythm is great. It's not your straightforward rocker, and like I said, the atmosphere is so there, just such a sleazy and sexed up atmosphere, and it's just really great. But then we have Outlaw. This one, David Coverdale voluntarily and on his own volition hands over the microphone to Bernie Marsden. This one is a little bit softer. It is kind of fast. It's definitely faster than the title track, but at the same time, it's kind of soft, if that makes any sense. I don't really like this one, and it's mostly because of Bernie Marsden. He is a great guitarist, but he is nowhere near as good a lead singer as David Coverdale is. I know I am not either, but I'm also not in the band Whitesnake, okay? I just really think Outlaw kind of suffers due to the lack of David Coverdale's vocals. I mean, Bernie Marsden, again, he's definitely a better lead vocalist than I ever would have done. He is definitely a great guitarist, but I don't know, I just really miss David Coverdale, and I think Outlaw is one of the weaker songs on here. But Rock and Roll Women does close things out pretty nicely, okay? This one reminds me a lot more of You and Me and Mean Business. It is another, once again, pretty straightforward rocker, again, having that 50s rock and roll vibe to it. And it's also very, very sexed up. I mean, I'm looking for a Rock and Roll Women tonight. I really like that one. But then it all closes with We Wish You Well. Now, this song is only about a minute and a half or so, and it is a piano ballad. Now, in my previous episode, I was talking about a Dio album called Angry Machines, and I said that the little piano ballad at the end, I don't think it jived very well with the rest of the album. I think this one jives a little bit better, okay? It's also, again, very, very soft. Like I said, it's a piano ballad. It's very soft and it's very emotional, but I think it does kind of work, and David Coverdale is putting his heart and soul into this, and I definitely got to give him credit for that. So, I mean, We Wish You Well closes things out pretty well. This would end up becoming one of the band's signature songs. I think they closed a lot of their greatest hits compilations with this. I think they may have closed their concerts with this, at least at one point, maybe over the stereo or over the loudspeaker. I could be wrong about that. Please don't be too harsh on me if I am. But yeah, this is a great, it's kind of a great little coda for the album. It's kind of a swan song for what came before it, and I think it does close things out very, very nicely. But like I was kind of alluding to before, the best song from side 2 is going to be Lovehunter. Ask me another day, it might be Mean Business, but right now it's Lovehunter. Such a great song, and it just sets the mood so incredibly well, and I really love Lovehunter. So that is going to be it for my review of Lovehunter by Whitesnake. Do I recommend this album? Yes, I do. But going into it, you've just got to really understand that at this point in the band's career, they were a totally different beast. They were trying to differentiate themselves from Whitesnake. So it's not really a continuation of, what am I saying? They're trying to differentiate themselves from Deep Purple. So it's not really a continuation of Deep Purple, and it's also not the Whitesnake you know from the 80s, or at least the late 80s, but it is very good for what it is, and I think it's a very solid blues rock album. So anyways, guys, I will continue to be very energetic, and next week I'm going to be blasting fast and loud. But until then, have a very pleasant evening.